Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Rob Pelinka said before the season he needed 30 games to evaluate where this team is before he could make a deal. Guess what game we just had? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends. No matter how or where you get your podcast, this one's always going to be free and never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where over 26,000 subscribers, Andy, have been patiently marking their calendars, Xing off every game that the Lakers play, patiently waiting for the arrival of Game 30, the magical game set by Rob Pelinka before the season started, so he would have a good idea of where the Lakers are and what they need. And by golly, Andy, Christmas wasn't just a victory. It wasn't just a present in that regard. It was also the 30th game of the season. So Christmas has come in that sense for Lakers fans as well. We will get into all of that and what it might mean going forward in just a moment. Do want to let people know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs almost here. Though it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Andy, you may remember that in the preseason leading into training camp, Rob Pelinka sat down with the media and was asked about the relative inactivity of his front office in the offseason and what they might do to improve the roster. And he noted that, they're always looking to improve, Andy, always. But he would need about 30 games to really get a feel, while they believe in the team, to get a feel for what they might need and where they are before he'd feel comfortable making some trades. Well, we're here.
I mean, as the old saying goes, you never want to make a trade until you've seen your roster for 2.5 seasons. So we're getting pretty. We're not. And look, to be fair to Rob, we are not quite at 2.5 full seasons of essentially the same roster. Yeah, it really reflected the professionalism of the media at large, that all of us were assembled in this room with Rob Pelinka and JJ Redick, and nobody burst out laughing when we heard that. Like, not that there aren't smaller details or minutia, or the idea of we want to see how JJ Redick operates this group and, new system on both sides of the ball, yada, yada, yada. Like, those are legitimate things that you wanted to see play out, with the question of would D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves ever get separated as a starting backcourt? The answer being yes, although, again, we did get a look at what that looked like last year. But the idea that there are details that, yes, Rob Pelinka did need to see. But the idea that you would not have a general sense of the strengths and the weaknesses and what was missing from this roster without 30 games to see it, it would have just been, frankly, more believable if he said, look, man, I'm weighing all the different criteria and whatnot. I can't really do bleep until December 15th. So unless something really unexpected comes along, you got to at least sit tight until that day. This is what I'm working with, people.
Let me play devil's advocate here for a second, and then you tell me if these things are different enough in terms of trying to figure out, because I was supportive of the idea, like, you've waited this long, at this point, go into the season and be as precise as you can.
Well, Rob really sold it. I mean, he turned you into a
very compelling. It was very compelling. But to be fair to Rob, which we try to do, we try to be fair as we are also critical. But the logic of, okay, we've waited this long, we might as well just wait to see specifically what it is that rather than assume or guess, let's just wait and see what it looks like. And to that end, there are certain differences that were not there at the beginning of the season. Max Christie is now, it looks pretty well that he's not going anywhere. Like, he is going to be in the starting lineup for the foreseeable future. It looks like D'Angelo Russell is not going to be in the starting lineup for the foreseeable future. Gabe Vincent is starting to play well again, but I think they assumed that Vincent would be productive and useful at the beginning of the year. And so I'm not sure that necessarily changed. But like, when you start to put some of these things together, is there enough that's different contextually about this team that you think, and Jared Vanderbilt hasn't played yet, which I think they thought he probably would.
They had a pretty good sample size of what that looked like last year as well. Like, same with Christian Wood.
All I'm trying to do is be like, is there contextually enough difference that it actually lends more credence to what he was saying? The answer does not need to be yes. I'm just trying to be fair.
Here's why. I do think there is validity to some of the granular details you're not going to know until you see what it looks like under a new coach.
Right.
But like, for example, you bring up Vando. They were, to that point, the only people that knew Vando had feet surgery in the offseason. So like, if they weren't, like, this was a surprise to all of us, but they knew. So at this point, if they're not even planning for the possibility, like, even if this has taken longer than they expected or hoped, if they were not planning for at least the possibility of playing some games without Vando, then I wonder if they don't understand like what surgery is, like what it actually entails.
That's
which
possible.
I guess could explain some of the slow recoveries with a lot of guys.
Actually, it wouldn't be the worst explanation I've heard. Surgery. Okay.
And in the meantime, though, we've established this 30-day mark, and it comes at a time when Shams Charania had some interesting things to say on one of the ESPN NBA shows about what the Lakers are willing to do. And this is during a segment where he was talking about different teams and the trade market. Quote, the Lakers are in somewhat of a different boat. They feel like they've got their top heavy. When you think about LeBron James, Anthony Davis, how do we round out this team around both these guys? They're monitoring the sellers around the NBA, Portland, Washington, Toronto, maybe Chicago. And my sources in that Lakers front office tell me they are open to moving. They've got 3 first-round picks that they can trade. They're open to moving that in a potential trade. But they want a player that they feel can get into this iteration of the team now with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, but also play 3, 4, 5 more years under JJ Redick as the coach. It should be noted, like, the Lakers have the 29, 30, and 31 picks. They cannot trade all 3 of them at once because of the step-in rule. Like, I don't know if Shams was talking about maybe pick swaps in like, say, 2030 while you trade 29 and 31, or maybe you set up the beginning of this with a trade involving 29. I don't know exactly what he meant, but just for clarification, they cannot trade all 3 of those picks like before the deadline. That's not allowed, but at minimum they have 2 that they can.
I love that quote. And that, that leak from the Lakers front office for a multitude of reasons.
Shout out to Shams, by the way, for just saying where the leak's coming from.
Well, but like source in the Lakers front office, like the Lakers must hate that because it's there's 3 of us. It's like,
I'm just saying, nothing ambiguous about that.
No, but in a lot of organizations, a source in the front office indicates like that could be any, one of, any 15, 18, 25 people. In the Lakers, it's like 2, 3, but at least, it's stuff that the organization believes in. I want to unpack this quote here, definitely in the next segment. So let's get to that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC.
Okay, so, I mean, on the one hand, Andy, there's nothing about that quote where you look at it and say, it's wrong or it's a bad idea. Again, it reads, my sources in that Lakers front office tell me that they're open to moving. They're open to moving in potential trade. They want a player that they feel can go into this iteration of the team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, but can also play for 3 or 4 or 5 more years under JJ Redick as a coach. They want to make Andy the ideal trade. Like that would be, I agree with them. They should, in a perfect world, you find a player who is, good enough to make a difference now, fits in really well with Anthony Davis and LeBron, and can be part of a core that you have moving forward when LeBron eventually goes, whether that's next year, the year after that, but is, really good and can then join Anthony Davis as either a number 2 or like a really solid number 3, and be really part of. I mean, I agree with all of those things. That would be that'd be a great result. Go do that. The bigger question though is what happens if that's not the choice? Like, yeah, I mean, all of us could make the ideal trade. All of us would be like, you know what? It's worth putting in a couple first round picks for a really good player that can be a foundational piece in ways that are easy to see going forward. But let's just assume, Andy, that the trade market doesn't play out quite as neatly as that. Where are the Lakers willing to make a deal? Like, we talked about this, you and I filled in on 710 ESPN today, on Thursday, I should say. And one of the things we talked about was like, an A trade is easy to make. Would you make a B? What about a B minus? There is no trade that's going to turn the Lakers into a clear-cut favorite in the Western Conference. So how good do you need to be in order to do something aggressive? Does Rob Pelinka have an answer to these kinds of questions?
I would even unpack it a little bit further than that, like the idea of what are you willing to do? The parameters that were being leaked to Shams, the idea of a trade, as far as those first round picks go, a trade that will help them now, but also help them for, let's just say, the entirety of JJ Redick's current contract. Forget whether or not the Lakers can even make that sort of deal. Does that player even exist in the first place? Because I really started thinking about this and started going through a list of players that we keep hearing reports about them being available, and whether players like this fit that criteria before you even get into whether or not they are worth 2 first-round picks. Zach LaVine, by my math, at 30 is too old for that. Like he is too old, or he is on the verge, at the very least, of too old.
He's close. I mean, I think you could get 2 or 3,
but you're pushing it. You're really pushing it with someone like Zach LaVine beyond
just because of his injury history, I think.
Injury history and the age. Dorian Finney-Smith, he's 32 years old. He clearly wouldn't be that type of now and later move. Malcolm Brogdon's 32.
He's also not transformative in that way.
He's not, but I'm just thinking about dudes who are even available, like Cam Johnson. who is, I think, like a
28.
B-plus level,
Yeah.
B-plus level role player. He's 29. Like, is he talented enough in the right bracket to be worth that? Miles Turner, maybe if Indiana decides this is not working right now, and they have definitely been underperforming expectations off last year. He's 29 years old. Like, he'd be a great fit with Anthony Davis, but does he feel potentially within that window? Like, there are only two players I can think of that feel like you can even make an argument for this beyond whether or not you even think they're worth like 2 first-round picks. Just do they, Bruce Brown has not played this year. Like, there's no way in hell you do that deal for a guy that you haven't seen play.
Right.
Valanciunas is clearly not that guy. He's too old and not
right. And I think even if you said, like, let's not even think of the entirety of JJ Redick's contract, but let's just think fits this year and
with the Lakers. Do you really have to?
Right, exactly. But like fits this year and 3 more seasons.
Okay. It's basically the only guys that you've heard enough chatter about them being available to believe that they could be and fit into that now and then, now and later window. Brandon Ingram, Walker Kessler. That's basically it. Like, Brandon Ingram is 27 years old. He is younger than Anthony Davis. Walker Kessler is only 23. That's basic. And by the way, he's 23 years old. Utah has put out feelers that they're now not going to trade him, and I've never understood why they would have in the first place. But those are the only 2 players. That's basically.
Well, I mean, yes, I don't entirely agree with that framing, because, like, for example, I think especially when you start to factor in asking price, although, and we'll talk about this maybe in the third segment, like, the market is going to be really hard is I think hard to figure out right now. We got an early sign that it might be a buyer's market with Dennis Schroeder going to Golden State for basically a 2nd-round pick. But that doesn't necessarily mean the rest of the market's going to play out their way. And Schroeder was not necessarily the most sought after player. There are big names available, Jimmy Butler being the biggest, and obviously.
Well, according to Miami, though, on the record, Pat Riley said they're not trading him.
That may be, but regardless, the Jimmy Butler chatter, the news that Butler wants out, that was reported over Christmas. Pat Riley can say what he wants, but the reporting is the reporting.
Just giving an update.
But let's just say, like, that's Pat Riley posturing. We're not gonna, to try to generate some interest and all that stuff. So the names are out there, but how many of them move? So, I mean, I would say contextually, Brandon Ingram would cost more just as which guy is considered the better player than Cam Johnson. But
he is better than Cam Johnson.
He is, right. But Johnson, both, I think you can make the argument, if you're looking for somebody long-term, BI is younger, but may have more age on him in terms of injury problems. Cam Johnson's had some stuff in and out of the lineup, but isn't, BI is pretty constantly hurt and plays a larger role. So in terms of, like, when you think about aging into a role or something like that, you get, 30-31 season. I think the most appealing name in there in name / talent / the quote that you read is Johnson. I think he's the guy that fits the best. He's not too old. He's got a game that, especially as a guy whose offense is built around shooting first and foremost, although it's really expanded. He's had a really nice season with the Nets and shown he can do a lot more stuff. But on a team like the Lakers with LeBron and AD would slide into that complementary scorer role. He's a pretty good wing defender.
He's okay.
He's okay.
He's been that way in the past. He has not been lately.
On bad teams, it's hard to judge these things. But
it's been a while since he's been a really good defender.
Reputationally, he is somebody who's at least shown the capability and has people who will talk about him in the context of he can be a pretty decent wing defender. I didn't say great, and just, an upgrade over potentially what the Lakers have, or additive to what they have without hurting anything. And, the skill set is always going to be useful.
Yep.
That said, if Butler either doesn't move because Miami won't move him, or because the mechanics of trading for Jimmy Butler, whether you're certainly for the Lakers, but for any team really, are so incredibly complicated. And the number of teams that would be in the market to do it anyway is so small that maybe he doesn't go anywhere. Zach LaVine is not a new entry into the trade market. He has been there forever. And if people were really interested in going to get Zach LaVine, somebody would have done it by now. So I'm not sure that is a thing that happens. It is very possible that, broadly speaking, you're kind of in a seller's market or a buyer's market, except for somebody like Cam Johnson, who makes sense for a lot of teams, makes a reasonable amount of money, a little over $20 million a year or something like that. And I think at least has a game that ought to age well. He can fit into a role. He can be a bit more of a lead player. There's a lot going on there that would be appealing. And so for him, the asking price could be really high, and the Lakers may not be able to match what other teams are offering. They are in a tricky spot without a lot of players out there, like you say, that really fit the bill of what they at least claim that they're trying to do.
Well, I'm glad you phrased it like that, because coming up next, I want to get into whether or not the Lakers are in a tricky spot because that's the NBA, or they're in a tricky spot because they are trying their best to put themselves in a tricky spot. So we can talk about that coming up next. Locked On Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. You can tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you bet just $5 on Abe Lincoln, and you get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. And this would have been, by the way, really fun during all the Netflix hoopla and all that celebration, which went off without a hitch, I should say. Let's just say you're watching that whole extravaganza, but it feels like you're just predicting everything in a game before it happens. You just got a sense for everything, but you want to confirm those hunches. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you would place your bet. Just go to FanDuel.com to join today. And again, get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com, never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Reading that quote that we shared from Shams and the criteria that reportedly they are laying out if they're really going to make a big deal involving as many firsts as they can legally trade at this deadline, combined with the idea that Rob Pelinka laid out before, that he needed 30 games to really assess this team, which, as we explained, even acknowledging certain details that you need to see first, you should have a pretty good idea of what it is. And hearing that quote about the idea of, all those specifics, the trade for now and the trade for moving forward, and that would lead us to use all the picks. Like, that's criteria that could be viewed as, galvanizingly aggressive for fans to hear, or something that is very transparently serving up the outs.
Yes,
for Rob
absolutely.
Pelinka and Jeannie Buss. Like, they're leaking a willingness to do something, but at the same time, they're letting you know all the different things that need to match that criteria in order to do the big move. They really, right now, it's not a question of evaluating what you have in front of you. It's really a question of deciding to pick a lane. Like, you need to pick a lane at this point. Are you going to make, within reason, without guarantees, obviously, but just a big move and invest in this group with LeBron pushing 40, with Anthony Davis in the back end of his prime? Or are you going to decide, disappointing as it may be, we don't believe in this group? And we feel like the window.
Can I stop you there for a second? What does that mean? We
What do you
don't
mean, what does
like
that
we believe in this group. We don't believe in this group. Believe in
We-
them to do what?
Believe in them to make, if nothing else, a good playoff run versus we see them as a one and out and that's it.
At the very least, plausible contenders to get
Yes.
out of the West.
They where they have a puncher's chance.
I wonder if puncher's chance actually is sort of overplaying. Like I think the organization may feel like they need more than a puncher's chance.
Okay, well then even underscoring further what I'm talking about.
That's the point that I'm making. Yeah, I agree with you.
If the criteria is we need to be championship front runners to make a deal, or else we're not going to make one, then what you are actually saying is we don't believe in this core as it is. Like there has to be a baseline that you believe in them in order, because they're either close to that right now or they're not.
Here's how I would frame it. And I think everybody agrees. Like, okay, if you can, like we said in the first segment, like if you can find a guy that, and I think Cam Johnson actually qualifies, but if you can find a guy who can make you better now, fits in well later, good solid salary structure, the deal makes sense, like it's just a good trade. Like, yes, obviously we call that making a good trade. Like that's not believing or not, but that's just making a good trade. But let me ask you this, because this is where the hard part comes for Pelinka. Let's say, and I'm not even putting a name attached to this because I don't think it's important for the question that we're asking here. Let's say you can't find a deal that fits that long-term horizon where you can look at it and say in 3 years, this guy's gonna be a great fit with what we're doing, 3 or 4 years. But you can definitively say that person gives us a reasonable chance to get out of the conference this year.
Sure.
What does Rob Pelinka do?
I think not make the deal.
I agree with you 100%. I think he would not make that trade.
I interpret the language that we hear from Shams on top of everything that we've already seen is, again, this is not a question of evaluating the roster and what you have. This is a question of picking a lane, or more specifically, finding the guts to pick a lane, or finding the justification to not pick a lane. Because to me, the thing that frightens the Lakers more than anything else as an organization is perceived irrelevance, like not being part of the conversation. And as long as LeBron and Anthony Davis, and very specifically LeBron, as long as they're on this roster, they will always be talked about, the Lakers, if for no other reason than figuring out how much longer those guys will be on the roster. But they will be paid attention to. They will always play on Christmas. They will always play opening night, all of that stuff. Like they will always be very surface level, cosmetically relevant.
Yes.
And I have heard, whether on the comment section of the YouTube page or on Twitter at Cam Brothers, fans express the opinion, and I think there's some validity to this, that the Lakers would rather be a 7-ish seed with a star, with an unquestioned superstar, because that is, in their minds, something definitive in terms of identity, as opposed to actually making some type of move where they recognize our superstars aren't good enough. We might need to rebuild it. We might need to actually trade our superstars.
A tear down.
If you are not willing to make a big win now move with LeBron pushing 40 and Anthony Davis at the back end of his prime, then really what are you doing? Because you don't have enough runway to kick this thing down the road any further. And you and I have expressed more patience than a lot of other people who cover this team in terms of the idea that Lakers always have to be all in every moment with LeBron. But we've reached a place now where if you're not going to do this with LeBron at 40 and Anthony Davis pushing his prime as far as it can go, then again, unless you are just afraid of seeming quote unquote irrelevant, what is the point of all of this?
I think
what's the point?
and we can quit here because we can get into this as we get closer to the deadline and stuff like that, and hopefully as the Lakers keep putting together wins and improving this record, they can't be scared of doing any trade can go poorly.
Right.
They're still frightened. They're still, gun shy from the Westbrook thing. But like may have mislearned the lesson. The lesson wasn't don't make bold trades. The lesson there should be don't make stupid trades that anybody could see were stupid before they were made. I love to tell the story. Our most traffic show of that year, by a lot, was the Lakers trade for Russell Westbrook. Our second most traffic show of the year was 3 days earlier when the rumors started, and we did a show about how it couldn't possibly be true because that is such a stupid idea that that can't be a real thing. So it was nakedly obvious to two doofuses like us that was not going to be a good trade. So the lesson is make good trades, don't make any trades. And anything you do, if you're going to do a win now trade, you have to be comfortable with the idea that this rebuild, which is going to be difficult and painful, sometimes I think more painful than fans are willing, they're really thinking through, but that's okay. I'm not picking on fans. You have to do it with the understanding that this trade is going to make that rebuild a little bit longer and a little bit more painful. And we have to be comfortable with that because it gives us a better chance to win right now and probably next year. And that's got to be part of the deal. This notion of we want to make a perfect trade, get out of here with that, because anybody can say, yes, we want to make an excellent trade. Stop it.
If you don't believe in it, and look, I can see arguments for believing in it. I can see arguments for not believing in it. I'm not even saying that the choice is obvious. What I am saying is obvious, though, is that now is the time to do something definitive. You cannot put it off any longer, no matter what you decide to do. You cannot kick this thing down. It makes no sense to kick it down the road any further. That's just cowardice.
Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 26,000 subscribers. Sign up for the newsletter. Forgot to mention that. Where we'll be back after Saturday's game. You can check out the postcast with Dave Pillay as well. But again, sign up for that newsletter. It's helpful to us. LockedOnDaily.com. Go click on Locked On Lakers. We'll see everyone after the game on Saturday.